Hey everybody, welcome to In the Kitchen with Mike. I'm Mike, I'm the executive chef here at Bellaire at Stoneport. And today I am going to show you all how to make country fried steak and cream gravy. So we are in the country and this is a hugely popular thing with our residents. So I'm going to show you how to make it from scratch today. One thing before I get started, I do want to let you know, I know I'm not wearing a mask right now, but there's nobody around. We're making sure that we're keeping everybody safe. Nobody's going to be eating this food, so we are keeping our residents safe. All right, so for the steak portion of our dish, we are going to need cube steak. You can find this in a grocery store most places, but if you can't find cube steak, then you can also use a top round or a top sirloin. Today we're going to use a top sirloin, and we're just going to tenderize it so that way it gets us nice and flat like we need it to be. Also, we're going to need 1.5 cups of half and half or buttermilk if you have it. We have flour, about 1.5 cups of flour. Half a teaspoon of white pepper, a half a teaspoon of paprika, a half a teaspoon of onion powder, a half a teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and then salt to taste. So that just depends on your liking, how much salt you want in there. I'm going to use about a half a teaspoon of that as well. And then I also have eggs here to make our egg wash. So when we go to flour our steak, we'll have those. And then for our cream gravy, we're going to use about 2 to 3 cups of milk. We're going to use about 4 tablespoons of flour, and then 4 tablespoons of butter, and then just salt and pepper to your liking. All right, so first we're going to start with how to make the cream gravy. So what you're going to do is start and put your butter into a pot on, I would say, about a medium heat, and let that melt. Make sure you keep a whisk handy because you're going to need it when we add the flour so that we get it nice and mixed. All right. So when you do this, you can also use margarine if you want. I'm a big fan of real butter, especially being in the country. It just adds that extra flavor to it. So, but whatever you like. We also, if you are allergic to gluten, a good alternative to doing this would be to use cornstarch to thicken. You would just do that at the end after you've added the milk. You just mix a little bit of cornstarch with some water and add it to your boiling milk. All right, so now that our butter's melted, I'm gonna go ahead and add the flour. We're gonna mix this together really well. So we wanna get all the lumps out of the flour. And you should have basically the consistency of almost like a wet sand when it's all said and done. So that'll be our thickening agent to really thicken the gravy. So if you like your gravy thick, maybe add a little bit more flour and butter. If you don't like it so thick, you like a thinner gravy, just a little bit less flour. But now that that's done, I'm gonna go ahead and add the milk. Or you can also use half and half for this if you like. That'll give it a little bit better flavor. And we're just going to mix that up. And we're basically just going to be heating the milk until it comes to a slow boil. And then it should start thickening up. All right, so while we let that go, I'm going to go ahead and whisk our eggs together for our egg wash for our steak. So I'm just going to go ahead and crack a few eggs in a bowl. Now again, depending on how much steak you're eating or how many people you're feeding, I would say use about 3 or 4 eggs for this recipe. That'll give us 4 steaks. So we're gonna go ahead and drop those in there and just whisk them up really well. So all your yolk and white are blended. And again, this is just gonna be our egg wash for when we dip our steak, or when we bread our steaks. All right, so we're just whisking our eggs until they're thoroughly mixed. Then I'm gonna go ahead and add a half and half now, or buttermilk if you have it. So I'm just gonna mix that up nice and well so that it's all thoroughly mixed. All right, and that'll be our egg wash for our steak. Now we're gonna go ahead and tenderize our steaks, but before I do that, since today I'm using top sirloin, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this little bit of fat on the edge off, because otherwise that'll give you a tough, chewy part when you cook the steak. So we're just gonna trim that off a little bit. All right, there we go. So now we're gonna go ahead and tenderize our steak. So get your meat tenderizer, and one trick when you're tenderizing meat, in order to avoid making a mess, grab some plastic wrap, put it over top of your meat before you start tenderizing. So that way, as you're hitting it, juice doesn't fly everywhere and you just have a big mess. So the plastic wrap helps keep the meat contained. So we're gonna just wanna tenderize this really well so it's nice and thin. All right, and there we go. So there's our tenderized piece of sirloin. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing to this other piece. And don't be afraid to put a little force behind this, because you're not gonna hurt the meat. You just wanna get it nice and tender and flat, so that way when we bread it and cook it, it'll cook quickly. So there we go. So we've got our tenderized steaks, or our cube steak now. All right, so now that we have our egg wash and our steaks tenderized, we're gonna make our flour mix to bread the steaks with. So we're gonna take our flour, again, it's about 1.5 cups, and then our white pepper, paprika, onion powder, some garlic powder, baking powder, or baking soda works too if you don't have baking powder, and then a little bit of salt. I'm gonna go ahead and mix that all up. Now, I like using white pepper, but you don't have to use white pepper if you don't like it. You can substitute black pepper for it. I like white pepper, I think it has good flavor, but you gotta be really careful, because if you use too much, it gets really spicy. So we're just gonna mix this all up. And then I like to take my flour mixture and put it on a plate so that it's easy to bread the steaks with. And I'm not gonna put it all on there, because then it'll start to get wet and clumpy, and so I'm gonna leave some aside. What I'm gonna do is we're gonna take our steak, dip it in our flour, get a nice coating, and then we're gonna dip it in our egg, and then back in the flour. So that way you get a nice thoroughly coated mixture on your steak. Okay, we're gonna set that aside. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing with the other three. Again, flour, eggs, and then flour again. And if you like a little bit thicker breading on your steaks, you can always do this again. So do it 3 times. So go back into the egg and then add some more flour onto it. The more you do it, the thicker the breading is gonna be, and the better off you'll be that way. All right, so now that our steaks are all breaded and ready to go, we're gonna get our pan, put it on the stove, and then we're gonna add a little bit of oil to your pan. So you wanna add enough oil to at least cover half of the steak. So we're gonna say about that much. And then go ahead and turn your stove on and heat up your oil, and I would say over about a medium to medium high heat. We're gonna let that heat up for a few minutes, so that way it gets nice and hot. All right, so a cool little trick on how to tell if your oil is hot enough or not, just take a little bit of water on your fingers, splash it into the pan. If it doesn't do anything, then it's not quite hot. What you want is a pop. So you can hear it's getting there. You hear little pops, but what you're gonna want is, as soon as you splash the water in there, it should pop immediately, and that's how you know that your oil is hot enough. All right, so our oil should be just about done. We're gonna do the splash test again. Just be careful when you do this. You wanna stand back a little bit, because the oil will splatter up. But you see how it started popping right away? That means we're good to go. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and grab our steaks. I'm using tongs. I highly recommend it because when you put your steaks in, the oil might splash a little bit, and it's the easiest way to flip the steaks and handle them. If you don't have tongs, you can use a fork if you want, or some other utensil. But we're gonna go ahead and take our steaks and just drop them right down here in the oil and make sure they're nice and flat. All right, so we're gonna let this cook for, I would say, about 3 to 4 minutes. And then we're gonna flip them over so that both sides get evenly cooked. And then this is steak, so you can cook it as much or as little as you want. If you like it rare, if you like a rare steak, you could always do a rare steak this way, but most of the time we cook it all the way, so it's well done. All right, so it's been about 3 or 4 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and flip these over so that they get nice and browned on both sides. And again, this is why tongs make it so much easier. So we're gonna let the steaks cook on this side now for a little bit. All right, so our steaks are just about done now. So we got a nice golden brown on both sides. If you have a meat thermometer at home, you're gonna wanna see about 155 degrees, 160 degrees, if you measure the center of your steak. But we're gonna go ahead and just take these out. Put them on the plate. Oh. All right, and so now that our steaks are done, we're just gonna go ahead and put our gravy right on top of them. And put as much or as little gravy as you like. If you have a ladle, it's great for scooping out gravy. If not, a spoon will work too. All right, and there you go. There's your homemade country fried steak.